In this section, we are talking about social and cultural confounding factors. Now, in layman's terms, that pretty much means you can't look at Little Emperor Syndrome becoming a problem in China since one-child policy was adopted until now without looking how society and culture has changed since then. Now, since it was implemented in 1979, there have been massive changes in China. Whether that be political, social, or cultural, there have all been massive changes. So what that means to this research in terms of Little Emperor Syndrome is that family unit is a #1 reason. Typically in China, before 1979 and before the implementation of one-child policy, families in China had more than one child, and it was typical for them to have at least two, and ranging up to however many they wanted to have, and that is essentially comes down to where you live and what you need in terms of manpower, etc., etc. Also, in terms of change, we also need to look at the taboo of having an only child. So this has been documented throughout time, and in retrospect, there was a time in the United States history where the same thing happened, and it was near the baby boomer generation. So all these families kind of went from a multiple child family and a lot more only child families began to pop up in society. So rapid changes began to happen, and people really didn't know how to take that. It's because once something is kind of a social or cultural norm, then it becomes the norm. So if you're an only child, then that's not so in the norm, and that becomes kind of a taboo. And only children are seen as kind of these outcasts, or asocial, or have personality defects. Everything that you pretty much see within the criteria of Little Emperor Syndrome. But as time went on, people began to see, well, there's not that many problems with only children, and like we said in the last section, there's really no difference between only children from children that have siblings in terms of multiple aspects of their lives. So one has to look at the changes that have happened in society and culturally and politically to understand kind of where these either stigmas or these changes, like going from one child or going from that family where you have multiple children to one that only has one child, because that's a huge change, not only within their culture, but within their history. So it creates different divisions, not only amongst people, but in the culture itself. So the confounding factors in cultural and society have to be looked at when considering Little Emperor Syndrome, because people are always resistant to change, and they're hesitant to change, and that's essentially what Little Emperor Syndrome seems to be boiling down to.